Selling things online always comes with a bit of risk. You never know who's on the other side of the transaction or what their real intentions are. But I'd used Craigslist plenty of times before and never had any real issues. So when I decided to sell my old bike, Craigslist seemed like the obvious choice. I had outgrown it in more ways than one. It was still in good condition though, just not practical for the kind of biking I was doing now. I posted some pictures, wrote up a description, and set a fair price. Within a day, I got a response from someone named Jeffrey. He said he was interested and wanted to come by to take a look. Simple enough, right? I didn't think twice about inviting him over. I had done this before. Usually people came, checked out the item, and either bought it or didn't. Easy. But this time was something else. Jeffrey seemed eager, messaging me throughout the day with questions about the bike, how well it rode, if there were any problems, and when would be a good time to swing by. I answered everything, and we agreed he'd come by around 7 p.m. that evening. It was fall, so the sun was already dipping by then, but it wasn't too late. I didn't mind the timing. Besides, I figured an evening sale might be easier since there'd be fewer people around, less noise, less hassle. My neighborhood was safe, or at least it always felt that way. I was comfortable. I prepped the bike, cleaned it up a bit, and rolled it out into the front yard. It was one of those cooler evenings, with a light breeze and that crisp smell of autumn in the air. I checked my phone. Jeffrey was on his way. A little after 7 p.m., a car pulled up in front of my house. Not just Jeffrey. 3 guys stepped out instead. The moment I saw them, I felt a pang of unease. Jeffrey hadn't mentioned bringing anyone with him, and none of them looked like the kind of person who'd be interested in a bike. They were big, broad-shouldered, and dressed casually. I tried not to judge too quickly. Maybe Jeffrey had just brought some friends along for the ride, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. One of the guys waved at me as they approached, smiling. He introduced himself as Jeffrey, but his voice didn't match the casual tone of the messages. His smile felt forced. The other 2 guys hung back a bit, not saying anything. "Hey," Jeffrey said, his eyes scanning the bike. "This the one?" I nodded, trying to keep things light. "Yep, that's it. Just tuned it up yesterday. Want to take it for a spin?" One of the guys stepped forward, looking at the bike like he didn't even care about it. He was more interested in the house, looking at the front door, than back at me. That's when the second guy spoke up. "Mind if I use your bathroom real quick?" That threw me off. I wasn't expecting anyone to ask to come inside. But it wasn't the first time someone had needed to use the bathroom during a sale, so I figured it wasn't that weird. "Sure," I said, motioning toward the door. "Just straight through the hallway." I kept my eyes on the 2 guys standing outside as the third one walked into the house. They were acting casual, but it felt forced, like they were waiting for something. Jeffrey kept talking about the bike, asking if it had been in any accidents, but I could tell he wasn't really interested in my answers. His eyes kept shifting between me and the house, like he was waiting for a signal. That's when I realized the guy who had gone inside had been gone way too long. I excused myself, telling Jeffrey I needed to check something real quick inside. The moment I stepped into the house, I noticed it was too quiet. No sound of footsteps, no flushing toilet, just silence. I walked through the hallway, past the bathroom, and saw the door was slightly ajar. Empty. Panic hit me then. Where was he? I turned and headed toward the living room. My heart quickened as I searched the space. The guy wasn't in the bathroom, and he definitely wasn't in the hallway. Then I saw movement. The back door. It was slightly open, like someone had slipped out. I could feel my heart start to race. I moved toward the door, not sure what I was going to find, when I heard the faintest creak from the floor above me. He was upstairs, and he had no reason to be there. I didn't think, I just acted. I bolted toward the front door, adrenaline kicking in. As I reached the doorway, one of the guys stepped in front of me, blocking my exit. He didn't say anything, just stood there with this blank expression, his hands at his sides like he was ready to stop me if I tried to push past. "Everything all right, man?" Jeffrey asked from behind me, his voice calm but with an edge that made my skin crawl. "I think you guys should leave," I said, trying to sound firm, but my voice wavered. Jeffrey took a step closer. "We're not done looking at the bike, are we?" My gut screamed at me to do something, but I was trapped. One guy in the house, another blocking the door, and Jeffrey closing in. I looked toward the staircase, hoping to catch sight of the third guy, but there was nothing. Just the growing realization that I had let these strangers into my house, and now I was paying for it. Suddenly, I heard a loud thud from upstairs, followed by footsteps, fast and heavy. Whoever was up there wasn't hiding anymore. Without thinking, I lunged for the side door leading to the garage. The guy blocking the front door moved to grab me, but I escaped. I sprinted through the garage, fumbling for the remote to open the overhead door. As it slowly cranked upward, I could hear footsteps behind me, getting closer. The door wasn't even halfway up when I ducked and rolled under it, scraping my arms on the concrete as I scrambled to my feet. I heard the garage door slam shut behind me just as I burst into the driveway, running for my neighbor's house. I pounded on their door, yelling for help, praying someone was home. After what felt like an eternity, the door swung open and my neighbor, an older guy named Jack, stepped out. "They're in my house," I shouted. "Call the cops." The police arrived in minutes, but by the time they got there, the three men were gone. They had taken a few things, some cash, my wallet, and an old iPad I didn't use much. But the real loss was the sense of safety I'd always felt in my own home. The cops told me I was lucky. It could have been much worse. They had seen scams like this before, people posing as buyers to scope out houses, waiting for the right moment to rob or worse. The fact that I had gotten out when I did probably saved me from something more dangerous. I spent the next few days on edge, jumping at every little noise. I couldn't stop thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't made that run for the garage. I never sold anything on Craigslist again. That bike, I gave it away for free. I had just moved into my new apartment in Julian, California, and like anyone trying to save a few bucks, I was all over Craigslist looking for cheap or free furniture. You'd be surprised at what people are willing to give away. A few days into the search, I came across this ad for a maple wood TV stand. The pictures made it look solid, well made, almost new, and best of all, it was free. The seller, Anna, didn't give much information beyond pickup required, must take today. I figured it was worth checking out. I mean, it was for free, after all. I sent a quick text to the number in the ad asking if the TV stand was still available. The response came almost instantly. "Yes, it's still here. Are you able to pick it up today?" I shot back a "yeah, that works," and asked for the address. Anna sent it over along with a weirdly specific instruction. "I won't be home, but the door will be unlocked. Just go in and take the stand." That gave me pause. I don't know about you, but something about walking into a stranger's house while they weren't there didn't feel right at all. I didn't want to seem paranoid though, and it wasn't like I hadn't seen stranger stuff on Craigslist before. Maybe she was at work and just didn't have time to be there for the pickup. So against my better judgment, I agreed. The address was a bit out of the way, where the houses are more spread out and there's a lot of open land. It wasn't the most populated area, but it wasn't totally isolated either. One of those places where you'd feel safe during the day, but not so much at night. The drive was chill at the beginning. Nothing going on. The roads were familiar, and I had my music on, trying to relax. But as I got closer, things started to feel different. The sun was starting to set as I pulled into the driveway of what looked like a typical suburban home, though it had clearly seen better days. The front yard was overgrown with weeds creeping up onto the cracked concrete walkway. There was no car in the driveway, just the house sitting there, quiet and still. I turned off the car and stared at the place for a second. The porch light flickered weakly as if it was on its last leg, and the whole thing just had this vibe. You know that feeling when you step into a place and it feels like something's watching you even though there's no one around? That's what hit me the moment I parked. Still, I wasn't about to back out now. It was just a TV stand and I figured I'd be in and out. I texted Anna again to let her know I had arrived, but didn't get a reply. No big deal. She had said she wouldn't be home, after all. I got out of the car, walked up to the front door, and just like she said, it was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The moment I stepped in, I was hit by this heavy, musty smell. It wasn't exactly foul, but it definitely wasn't the smell of a house someone had been living in recently. The air felt stale, like it hadn't been aired out in a while. I stood in the entryway for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the dim light. The house was eerily quiet, except for a faint creaking sound that I assumed was just the old wooden floors settling. I did my best to shake off the weird feeling creeping up on me. It was an old house. Old houses made noises, right? I took a deep breath and stepped further inside. There wasn't much furniture in the living room, just an old couch and a coffee table that looked like it had seen better days. The TV stand, the one I was here to pick up, was sitting against the far wall. It was bigger than I expected, solid wood like the ad said, but it didn't look like something someone would just give away for free. I looked around the room feeling more and more out of place. The house didn't feel lived in. There were no pictures on the walls, no decorations, nothing that made it seem like anyone had called this place home for a while. Just as I was about to head over to the TV stand, I heard something. It was faint, almost like a whisper, but unmistakable. A voice, a woman's voice coming from upstairs. I froze. At first, I thought maybe I was hearing things. Maybe it was the wind, or maybe I was just imagining things because of the way this place felt. But then I heard it again, a little louder this time. Hello? Is someone there? It was unmistakably a woman's voice, but something about it didn't sit right with me. It was too soft, too distant, like it wasn't coming from someone standing in a room, but from somewhere further. I took a deep breath and called out, "Anna?" No response. My pulse was quickening, and I wasn't sure what to do. Anna had said she wouldn't be home, so who was upstairs? Part of me wanted to get the hell out of there right then, but the other part, the part that didn't want to seem like a coward, kept me rooted to the spot. Maybe she had come home after all. Maybe it was nothing. But then, why wouldn't she have responded to my text? I looked up toward the stairs, and that's when I saw it. The shadow of feet just visible from the landing. Someone was standing there, just out of sight. My heart jumped into my throat. The feet didn't move, didn't shift. They were just standing there, like whoever it was waiting for me to come up. That voice echoed in my head again, but now it sounded wrong, hollow. Suddenly, I realized the voice I'd heard, it wasn't quite right. It had sounded like a woman at first, but now, thinking back, there was something off about it. It was too deep, almost like someone trying to imitate a woman. My gut twisted, and I knew, without a doubt, that whatever was upstairs wasn't Anna. Before I could react, the feet moved. Quick, heavy footsteps started toward the stairs, toward me. The door at the top of the stairs swung open, slamming against the wall, and I didn't wait to see what was coming down. I bolted for the front door. My feet slipped on the dusty floor, and I nearly fell as I grabbed the door handle and yanked it open. Behind me, I heard a voice. Deep, angry, nothing like the soft Anna I'd heard before. "Where do you think you're going?" I didn't answer. I flew out of the house, practically leaping down the porch steps, and sprinted to my car. I struggled with the keys, my hands shaking, before finally getting them into the ignition. I started the car and sped out of the driveway. I didn't slow down until I was miles down the road, surrounded by streetlights and traffic again. I pulled into a gas station parking lot and just sat there for a minute, trying to catch my breath. I grabbed my phone and looked at the text thread with Anna. No new messages. No explanation for what I just experienced. I blocked the number immediately. I thought about reporting the whole thing to the police, but what would I say? That I heard a creepy voice and saw someone's feet? That I nearly walked into... what exactly? A setup? A trap? I didn't have any answers. And honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted any. And even though I got away, I can't stop thinking about what would have happened if I'd been just a little slower. If I hadn't listened to my gut when I realized that voice wasn't right. I'd been trying to break into modeling for a while. Nothing serious, just some small gigs, Instagram collaborations, stuff like that. But I needed professional headshots, something more polished to send to agencies. So, like any broke aspiring model, I started looking for photographers on Craigslist. I know it's not the safest option, but when you're on a budget, you don't have a lot of choices. That's how I came across Leo. His ad was simple. Professional photographer looking to expand portfolio, offering discounted rates for headshots. He had a couple of sample photos in the listing, and they looked legit. Nothing too flashy, just well-lit, clean portraits of people who didn't look overly posed. I figured it was worth checking out. I emailed him, and he replied saying he had an opening later that week. We arranged to meet at his studio, which he said was in a part of town I wasn't super familiar with, but wasn't too far from the city center. Everything seemed fine, and honestly, I was just excited to get some professional shots without spending a fortune. But looking back, there were a few things that should have been red flags. The day of the shoot, I drove out to the address Leo had given me. The neighborhood was not what I expected. It wasn't exactly rundown, but it had that abandoned warehouse vibe, like a place where businesses had thrived once but hadn't been touched in years. A lot of the buildings were old and crumbling, and there wasn't much foot traffic. Most of the shops were closed, with faded for lease signs in the windows. Leo's studio was in one of those buildings, a cramped, two-story office that screamed 80s vibes like it hadn't been updated in decades. The paint was peeling, and the windows were covered with grime. There wasn't even a sign outside, just the building number, faded and barely visible. I double-checked the address he'd given me and tried to ignore the sinking feeling in my gut. I almost turned around then, but I had driven all the way out there and I needed those headshots, so I parked and headed inside. The front door creaked when I pushed it open, and I stepped into what could generously be described as a lobby. It was small, just a desk with a couple of old chairs. There was no receptionist, no signs or artwork, just a plain, empty space that smelled faintly of mold. I was about to text Leo to let him know I was there when a door at the back of the room opened and he stepped out. He was tall, maybe in his early 40s, with short hair and glasses. He was wearing a plain black t-shirt and jeans, and his demeanor was casual, friendly even. "Hey, Sophie, right?" he said, walking toward me and extending his hand. "Glad you made it. Come on in. The studio's just in the back." I shook his hand, my stomach still doing flips, but I smiled and followed him down a narrow hallway. The lighting was dim, and the floor creaked with every step. I kept glancing around, trying to take in my surroundings, but there wasn't much to see. Just old, faded walls and a few closed doors. We reached the end of the hall, and he opened another door, leading me into a small room with a backdrop set up against one wall. There was a single overhead light and a camera on a tripod. It was basic, but I figured it would do the job. "Go ahead and take a seat," Leo said, gesturing toward a stool in the middle of the room. "We'll start with some simple headshots, and then if you're comfortable, we can do a few more creative poses." I sat down, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled over me since I arrived. He fiddled with the camera, adjusting the lens and checking the lighting. I watched him for a moment, and that's when I noticed something strange. There were no other photos in the room. No examples of his work, no previous clients, nothing. Just bare walls and that single camera. He must have caught me looking because he gave me this weird smile. "I usually keep things pretty minimal in here," he said, almost like he was reading my mind. "I find it helps people focus better." I nodded, not really sure what to say. The whole thing just felt a bit off, but since I was already there, I didn't want to look like I was freaking out. So I sat still and waited as he adjusted the camera and started taking a few test shots. At first, everything seemed normal. Leo clicked away, giving me directions like chin up a little or look off to the side. It wasn't until about 10 minutes in that things started to get weird. "Try loosening up a bit," he said after a few shots. "Maybe take off your jacket." It wasn't a strange request, considering we were doing headshots, but the way he said it made me hesitate. His tone had shifted, slightly more insistent, like he was trying to push me out of my comfort zone without outright saying it. I took off my jacket, trying to keep things casual, but I could feel his eyes on me in a way that made my skin prickle. He started taking more pictures, but now his instructions were getting weird. "Turn a little more to the side, now tilt your head down, look back at me but keep your body angled away." I followed his directions, but something about the poses didn't feel right. They weren't headshots anymore. They felt more like something you'd see in a glamour shoot, and I wasn't prepared for that. I hadn't dressed for it, and I definitely hadn't agreed to it. "You've got a great figure," he said suddenly, his voice low. "Have you ever done anything more creative?" Something a little more daring? That's when it clicked. This wasn't just a headshot session. Leo had something else in mind, something he hadn't mentioned in his emails. The atmosphere in the room shifted and my discomfort grew. I glanced at the door, realizing it was closed, and the hallway outside had been dead silent. I tried to play it cool. "Actually, I think we've got enough for today," I said, forcing a smile. I'm not really comfortable with going any further. Leo's expression didn't change, but his posture did. He stood a little straighter, his fingers tightening around the camera. "Are you sure? We're just getting started. You'd be surprised how freeing it can be to step out of your comfort zone." "I'm sure," I said, my voice firmer this time. I stood up, grabbing my jacket from the stool, and moved toward the door. But Leo stepped in front of me, blocking the way. "Just a few more shots," he said, his tone darker now. "You came all the way out here? Don't you want to make it worth your while?" A sick feeling hit my stomach. I wasn't about to let this guy trap me in a room alone. I took a deep breath and squared my shoulders. I said, "I'm done." There was a tense moment where neither of us moved. Then, without another word, Leo stepped aside, his smile never leaving his face. But there was something else in his eyes now, something that made my skin crawl. I left the room quickly, not bothering to look back as I walked down the narrow hallway. All I could think about was getting out of that building. When I reached the front door, I practically threw it open and stepped outside, breathing in the cool evening air like I'd been holding my breath the whole time. I hurried to my car, locking the doors as soon as I got inside. I just sat there for a moment, trying to take it all in. Leo hadn't touched me, hadn't done anything outright dangerous, but the whole thing had felt wrong. The way he'd looked at me, the way he'd tried to push me into something I hadn't agreed to. It made my skin crawl. When I got home, I blocked Leo's number and deleted his emails. I didn't want to think about what could have happened if I hadn't stood my ground, if I had let him push me into doing more. I spent the next few days feeling uneasy, like I was being watched, but I knew it was just my nerves. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Leo wasn't just some guy trying to take pictures. There was something more behind his eyes, something darker. I reported the ad to Craigslist, but I never heard anything back. And to this day, I wonder how many other girls had gone to Leo's studio, thinking they were just getting headshots. Lucky for me, I didn't find out what he really wanted. Looking for a cheap, used laptop shouldn't be this difficult. But after a week of scrolling through Craigslist, dealing with sketchy ads, and people who ghosted me mid-conversation, I finally found what seemed like a decent deal. A Dell laptop, slightly used but in good condition, according to the pictures, for $200. The seller, Dave, had posted a few clear photos of the laptop, and honestly, it looked legit. No weird reflections on the screen, no stolen images from a product website, just a simple listing. "Pickup preferred, but willing to meet halfway," the ad read. That worked for me. I didn't mind meeting in person as long as it wasn't too far out of my way. So I messaged Dave and he replied right away. Seemed like a good sign to me. "Hey, I'm interested in the laptop. Still available?" "Yep. Can meet tonight if you're free. Let me know where you're coming from and we'll find a spot in the middle." The quick response felt reassuring, though a little too eager. Maybe he just wanted to unload it quickly. I didn't want to overthink it. After all, I was getting a good deal. We settled on a meeting place, a 7-Eleven just off the highway, halfway between where I lived and wherever Dave was coming from. It was a spot I'd been to before, well lit, with plenty of people going in and out, so I wasn't too worried. We planned to meet around 9 p.m., which wasn't ideal, but I was ready to get this deal done. I got dressed, grabbed my wallet, and checked the cash, 2 crisp $100 bills, before heading out. As I drove, I kept having this nagging thought in my head that I couldn't shake. Why did I need this laptop so bad? Maybe it was the price. Maybe it was the feeling that I'd finally found something that wouldn't break the bank but could still handle the tasks I needed it for. Either way, I was committed now. The night was quiet, not many cars on the road, and I had the radio turned down low, trying to focus. About halfway there, my phone rang. It was Dave. "Hey man, just wanted to give you a heads up," Dave said. His voice sounded a bit rough, like he'd just woken up or smoked too many cigarettes. I'm having some car trouble. I had to pull off the highway, but it's nothing major. I'm just down a side road, about 2 miles from the 7-Eleven. I slowed down a bit, taking in what he'd said. The first thought that hit me was simple. Great, this is going to be a hassle. But then again, car trouble happens. I asked him for directions, and he explained how to get to this little side road that cut through some fields. I'll park near the entrance. You can't miss me, he added. You can check the laptop out, and if you're good with it, just drop the cash and we're set. Something about that seemed weird. Why not just meet at the 7-Eleven as planned? But I didn't want to blow the deal over something minor. I agreed to head over. The further I drove, the more isolated it felt. The side road Dave mentioned was one of those narrow gravel ones, lined with fields of tall crops on either side. It was late enough that there were no other cars, no lights except for my headlights. I'd driven by plenty of farms before, but this place felt like it had been forgotten. No houses, no barns, nothing but rows and rows of cornfields stretching out endlessly. The corn stalks swayed in the breeze as my car rolled down the gravel road. I slowed down as I approached what I assumed was Dave's car, a beat-up pickup truck parked just off the road at a slight angle. The headlights were off, and it looked like it had been sitting there for a while. No sign of movement. I parked a few feet behind it, leaving my car running just in case, and looked around, trying to make sense of the situation. There was no laptop in sight. I gave it a minute, thinking maybe Dave was just running late or had stepped away for a second. But as the seconds ticked by, the whole thing started feeling off. I was about to call him when my phone buzzed in my hand. Hey, sorry. Had to step into the cornfield for a second. Nature called. The laptop's in the car. Just drop the cash and take it. Should be good to go. There was something incredibly unsettling about the idea of someone just lurking in a field. My instincts were screaming at me to leave, but I still wasn't ready to blow off the deal entirely. Maybe it was my need to not feel like an idiot for driving all the way out here, or maybe I didn't want to admit that this whole thing was a bad idea from the start. Either way, I pushed down the unease and stayed. Then I stepped out into the night. The air was thick and still, no sound except for the rustling of corn leaves. I approached Dave's car cautiously, looking toward the cornfield every few seconds, trying to catch any glimpse of movement. But there was nothing, just rows of tall stalks swaying slightly in the breeze. I reached for the passenger door, my hand hesitating on the handle. There was no reason to trust this, no reason at all. Right before I could pull the door open, I caught it, a soft rustling from the cornfield. At first, I figured it was just the wind, but the sound got louder, more defined, like someone was slowly making their way through the field. I backed up slowly, my eyes darting toward the rows of corn, scanning for any sign of Dave. The rustling stopped, and for a moment, everything went dead silent. I stood there, my body tense. That's when I saw it. A figure emerged from the cornfield right behind me. The way they moved was strange, almost too smooth, like they were gliding through the stalks. My stomach sank. This wasn't some guy who just needed a quick bathroom break. Something else was going on here. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I turned and sprinted back to my car. I heard the rustling again, faster, as if whoever was in the field was now coming after me. I threw myself into the driver's seat and slammed the door. The headlights flickered on just as I saw two figures standing at the edge of the cornfield, both staring at me. Neither of them moved. I didn't hesitate. I hit the gas and pulled away. As I sped down the road, I kept checking the mirror, sure I'd see those figures following me, but they didn't. Still, it felt like I had just barely escaped something much more dangerous than just a sketchy Craigslist deal. It seemed like the road just kept going, stretching on endlessly, but eventually I saw the lights of the highway up ahead. I felt a huge sense of relief as I pulled onto the main road, leaving the isolated farmland in the dust. I pulled into a diner a few miles down the road and parked, my hands still shaking as I cut the engine. I sat there for a while trying to process what had just happened. The figures, the car with no laptop. Had I been set up for a robbery? Or something worse? I blocked Dave's number as soon as I got home. There was no way I was reaching out to him again. The next day, I found a laptop at a pawn shop. Sure, it cost a bit more, but at least I didn't have to meet someone in the middle of nowhere at night. I still think about that night, though, about those figures in the cornfield standing there. I'm just thankful I didn't stay long enough for things to get worse. If these stories left you on edge, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more unsettling tales. Which story creeped you out the most? Drop it in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. Stay vigilant out there, and remember, what seems like a good deal can quickly turn into your worst nightmare. Share this video with your friends so they can stay safe too. Until next time, stay sharp and stay safe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.